Elder Law Planning Stories. I'm Gary Anderson, financial advisor, Anderson Advisors.
And I'm Kevin Tharp, elder law and estate planning attorney.
Kevin, in the previous segment, we talked about financial planning stories. We had a couple of stories there. And something that falls right hand in that, of course, like I said earlier, is estate planning, or elder law planning and estate planning for that matter. But elder law planning is something that a lot of people completely don't understand. They don't really know what elder law is and elder care planning. They don't even know what that is. So I know you've got some stories today that will help people understand what it is and the significance of doing that type of planning.
Gary, my next story, my elder law story, starts with May of 1988. That's when I graduated law school, just passed the bar exam, have had a job lined up with the IRS. I wanted to be a tax attorney. That's what Kevin Tharp wanted to be. But as it turns out, the good Lord had a different calling for me, different purpose for me. Because my grandfather had had a massive stroke. It caused him to lose the ability to do anything. He lost the ability to walk, talk. He had to relearn how to get a new speech. He had to relearn how to walk and function. It was a bad stroke. It was a massive stroke. And he had just had that on the tail end of being in the hospital and a short time in a nursing home because he fell and broke his hip. My grandfather, my mom's mom, was probably one of the strongest people that I think I ever met. Grew up in the Great Depression era, worked on the CCC camps, did a lot of work around here in North Georgia. It was always neat to go and hear my grandfather tell stories about, oh, I built that road and I built this road. And he grew up in Dawson County and Forsyth County. And my grandfather Green was just a very interesting man. So, it wasn't going to take a hip replacement that keep him down, but this was a pretty bad stroke that a lot of it was brought on by what happened when he fell and broke his hip. Mm-hmm. And so he spent an extensive time in a nursing home. He got a lot of therapy and rehab, and he spent years in that nursing home. Now, as strong as a person he was, he eventually came out. He eventually went home, and that was about the same time that my grandmother went into a nursing home. So May of 1988, I graduated. My grandparents were not able to be a part of my graduation. And I know that broke my heart, but I know it also broke their heart because they were very proud of the fact that I had gone through law school and I would be the first lawyer in the family. But they weren't able to go because my grandmother needed to be there with my grandfather. And after a short stay in the nursing home, his Medicare covered that short stay. And that's a story in and of itself. A lot of times people think that their health insurance or Medicare will cover a stay in a nursing home. And the reality of my grandfather's story is that's not the case. Medicare only covered him for about 3 months, about 100 days. And then after that, he was looking at either paying out of pocket or applying for Medicaid. And so we're looking for a nursing home for him to go into, but we're also trying to figure out how are we going to pay for it. And I'll never forget the conversation we had that day with the folks at the nursing home. My mother was there, my grandmother was there, and since I was the only lawyer in the family, they asked me to come along. And what did I know about elder law? In 1988. I wanted to be a tax attorney. If you wanted to have a conversation about step up and cost basis or generation skipping transfer tax or credit shelter trust, I was your man. But that topic never came up at my grandparents' kitchen table. What came up in that conversation was this: how are we going to pay for that nursing home? And in 1988, the costs were right around $5,500 a month. Now, my grandparents were on fixed income, Social Security. My grandfather had a pension from the years that he worked at the railroad. Combined, I think at that time, they were probably making about $2,500 a month. Not a bad living for fixed income. They didn't have any debts or bills, but when they're looking at $5,500 a month, that's the obvious question: how are we going to afford this nursing home care? Well, that's when the topic of Medicaid came up. And here's what my grandparents were told. You got to get rid of everything. You got to cash in every account you have. You got to sell your home. You got to get rid of everything. You got to sell everything. You're going to lose everything before you can get Medicaid to pay for your care.
You're listening to Truth in Planning. I'm Gary Anderson, financial advisor, and I'm here with my co-host, Kevin Tharp, elder law and estate planning attorney. Kevin, I think a lot of people have heard this. Even to this day, people get that same story, that you're going to lose everything to get this benefit.
Absolutely. It happens all the time. And that's exactly so. That's when my grandmother turned to me and said, "So I'm going to lose my home because your grandfather's in the nursing home?" And you know what, Gary? I didn't know the answer to that question. Like I said, I knew a lot of stuff about tax law. I was getting ready to start a job with the IRS. But I had no idea about Medicaid and whether she would lose her home or not. Well, today I do, because my experiences and professional experiences over the years has taught me that the moral of this story is you don't lose everything if you go into a nursing home, as long as these two legal principles are present. As long as you plan and you have an elder law plan that centers around these two legal principles. So what are they? Number one, type of asset. Type of asset determines protection. Now, law school didn't teach me everything, but it did teach me how to find the answers to things. And so I went to every conference, read every book, and I talked to everybody I knew that understood this elder law. And there were not a ton of people in Georgia. There was one guy in Georgia named Bill Overman. He started one of the founders of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. And one of the things that Bill Overman was known for was his generosity and his kindness. He took time to answer questions about this. Now, today, Bill Overman worked for the dark side. He works for the government. But at that time, he was really kind, and he taught me this principle. Type of asset determines protection. And your home, retirement accounts, life insurance policies, cars and personal effects, and many other types of assets are protected, single or married. You don't have to sell them. You don't have to cash them in. They are protected, and you can get Medicaid. And something else that he taught me, there is a protection for the spouse at home. So not only would my grandfather's assets be protected, but there would be more assets protected for my grandmother at home. So type of asset is the first principle that I learned that determines protection if you go into a nursing home. Here's the second thing I learned, and this is equally important, because one of the things my experience has taught me is over and over and over again, many professional advisors, including attorneys, even some that are elder law attorneys, skip that first step and they go to this second thing. You got to change ownership if you want to protect assets. If you want to protect your home, Grandma Green, you've got to put everything in your children's name. If you want to protect your bank accounts, you got to put your kids' names on everything. You got to get rid of everything. And that is actually the opposite. If you give up ownership, those things like your home that are protected are no longer protected.
So you're not going to be able to get benefits.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I think this is something people have been told so many times that is the general consensus out there, Kevin. When you have a conversation with people, this is what they go to. You just got to give everything away. You just got to do something to get it out of your name.
Exactly. And you know what? Things come around full circle. Full circle. My mother ended up in the same nursing home 34 years later that my grandfather was in. And guess what? We were told the same thing 34 years later, but here's the difference. I knew the answer to the question. No, you're not going to lose your home.
And you were just really, of course, you knew that's what they were going to say, but you thought the same thing at the time. I remember you telling me this. It's amazing that we got the same story. Different people, same story.
Absolutely.
And this is something that you constantly are trying to combat, is to make sure people understand that is not necessarily the way to do it. And Kevin, this is something that you do. This is what you do. You don't do any other type of law.
This is what I'm called to do.
Right. You focus on this, the estate planning, the elder law side. So that allows you to really be the source for the information that's really going to help people. So, Kevin, give people your name. We know your name. Give people your phone number and information as to how they can get in touch with you.
My number is 866-253-6994. My website's kevintharp.com.
A conversation is worth a lot. And if people can just come in and have that little conversation, free complimentary consultation, then I'm sure they'll get a lot out of it. You're listening to Truth in Planning on North Georgia's News Talk AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.